Welcome back to the Black Line Blueprint. Today we are getting into the recovery blueprint. So, this is how to sleep, manage stress, and move for performance and longevity. So, the goal of recovery isn't just to rest, it's to restore balance in the body and mind so you can train harder, adapt faster, and perform at your best. Recovery isn't just about doing less, it's about restoration, physically, mentally, and emotionally. It's what allows your body to handle more stress, your mind to stay sharp, and your motivation to stay consistent. So, what you'll get in this guide here today is a simple system to improve your sleep, manage stress, and recover better without complicated routines or time consuming protocols. You'll learn how to build awareness of your current recovery habits, identify the biggest gaps holding back your energy and performance, improve sleep quality with simple, sustainable habits, regulate stress so your mind and nervous system stay balanced, and use daily movement and active recovery to feel better and train harder. For those of you who are new here, welcome. I'm Coach Frederick. I'm a professional fitness coach and also a licensed physical therapist assistant. And my goal is to help people train smarter for performance and longevity. So before we get into how to start with this guide, go down to the description below and download the free recovery guide. If you're listening to this, then you'll just go onto the YouTube channel and then you'll download the guide in the description box below. Okay, so that way you can follow along and then I'll give you more detail on each and every point. All right. So, how to start. Before you dive into the pillars, you'll take 10 minutes to get a clear picture of where your recovery stands right now. So, step 1, track the basics for 3 days. So, you'll write down these three things for the next 3 days. So, hours of sleep the night before. So, how many hours of sleep did you get the night before? How you feel when waking up on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being energized, energy levels throughout the day, morning, midday, and evening, and then stress levels from a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the most stressed, and then steps or movement time for that day. And then finally, recovery from training on a scale of 1 to 5 if you trained that day, 5 being completely recovered from training. This isn't about perfection. It's just about just getting some awareness here. So if you don't measure it, you'll end up blaming the wrong things usually. So typically when performance doesn't go the way that you want, you typically blame the wrong things because you never actually assessed or you didn't reevaluate what may have changed to make the performance this time different. Okay. So the next step after you identify these areas, you want to identify what the biggest recovery gap is for you. So you'll ask yourself when it comes to sleep, am I consistently sleeping 7 to 9 hours per night? Do I wake up feeling rested or tired? That's sleep. Stress, you do I feel tense, rushed, anxious, or mentally overloaded most days? The next thing is, am I using tools to help downregulate my nervous system? And then for movement, am I moving gently on non training days? Do I walk or do mobility regularly? So you pick one area with the biggest gap, and that's your starting point. Usually, if sleep is one of your issues, that's where you start because that's going to give you the most return. If you have some type of life event, and we'll get into that going on right now, then you don't, and that interrupts your sleep, then maybe it's something else that you want to tackle there. All right. So the next step here is choose one behavior to improve. So again, for the next 4 to 6 weeks, commit to one simple, clear focus, such as in bed by 10:30 p.m. every night, 2 10-minute walks per day, 5 minutes of slow breathing before bed, no caffeine after noon, not afternoon, but after noon, and then mobility routine after every workout. Okay, start small, build momentum. You don't do everything at once because that doesn't last and it can become overwhelming. And then you won't really know what actually worked for you or what moved the needle forward. It's just like, okay, so if I do all these things and then all of a sudden you get better performance, you're just like, okay. But then if your performance starts to falter, you're just like, oh, it's because I didn't do all the things instead of making one correction, feeling better and being like, okay, so just doing that one thing helped. So again, just one small habit, see how that habit affects you. And then you'll have a good idea of the habits that move the needle the most. So, again, master one habit, feel the difference, then stack on that. All right. So, we're going to get into the pillars here. And the first pillar is awareness. So, recognizing the signs and causes. So, the goal here is to identify when recovery is compromised and understand what's creating it. So, many people confuse fatigue with effort. So they think because they're fatigued, that's a good thing. They did enough. And after your workout, yes, you'll feel some sense of fatigue for sure. But if that is like a thing throughout your entire day, weeks on end, that may actually be a sign of under recovery. So you want to really investigate that territory there. You don't want to just think, oh, fatigue, I did good. I put in a lot of effort. That's normal. It sometimes that's a kind of an old school mentality, especially in the like sports performance and training world of just like, yeah, work hard. If you're not fatigued, if you're not banged up, if you're not beat up, then you're not doing it right. But if you're consistently like that, then you may not be recovering right. Okay. And now we're going to get into so when you recognize these early signs of poor recovery, um, you can prevent these long term setbacks that you may get and injuries. Okay. So common signs of poor recovery: persistent soreness or stiffness. So, if we go on the model of adaptation from a workout or training in general, typically you train and you have a baseline. And if you think about the training that you do, it pulls your body below baseline of readiness and capability and capacity. And then once you rest and you're recovering, you start to go back up to baseline. And then once you're fully recovered, generally speaking, you want to be above baseline then. So you have a new level of performance. Now, if you don't rest, then you're constantly reducing your overall readiness. That is a very advanced training strategy. It is overreaching, really, is what it's called. So you're pushing, pushing, pushing performance, but that overreaching has to come with an extended rest and recovery period in order to supersede the previous level of performance. Because if you continue to overreach, then you're just going to continuously lower your overall readiness and capabilities with your performance. Okay, so it's huge to understand that. Typically, this scenario, it rides on a 48-hour kind of like recovery phase. So usually, let's just say if you worked out on Monday, you rest on Tuesday, or let's just say Tuesday is a lower training volume day. It's an easy day. And I mean like actual easy, not calling it easy and it still being hard, but an easier day, then you can still go back up. Like you start to build back up to baseline. Then by Wednesday, there shouldn't be any soreness there or very minimal soreness there or even stiffness there by Wednesday. And if that continues to go on past that, then that kind of lets you know, okay, we might be going into an overreaching phase. But if next week we know we're taking off the beginning of that week and then getting into some type of competition or training or whatnot, that's fine. We're pushing it to peak. But simply stating, for performance purposes and training and longevity, having a day of rest in between hard training sessions, and I mean, it could be active rest, it can be a very, very lower volume training day, um, or just complete rest that day in order to help you get back to baseline and improve your recovery there. So, persistent soreness and stiffness is a sign of overtraining and reaching that pretty much overdoing the overreaching portion. All right. So that's one sign. The next sign is injuries that take longer than usual to heal. So, again, if you're constantly breaking your body down, your body doesn't allow itself to heal that, maybe that injured tissue, that nagging pain that you may have in your knee joint or that nagging pain that you may have in your elbow, as efficiently, because it's using all of its resources for other things to recover and adapt from the training. So you have to give your body the rest that it needs in order to allow it to use those resources to heal that specific injury. Also, you can just be re-injuring that tissue, and not allowing it to heal properly. But it's just a sign of poor recovery if injuries are not healing, or taking longer to heal than usual. Okay. So trouble falling or staying asleep. typically, if you have elevated cortisol levels, that reduces your overall melatonin release. So when you're training very hard and not too consistently, but when you're training very hard and you're not allowing your body to rest or recover, then you're going to have elevated muscle tension. You're going to have elevated cortisol levels potentially. And especially if you're training closer to bedtime too, that's a whole nother thing. But it's going to be hard to fall asleep because your body needs to be in a relaxed state in order to start to get into that restful state. Also, if your cortisol levels are higher, that reduces the melatonin release that you need in order to feel tired and rested. Also, excessive muscle tension, that's excessive body heat. And your body needs to cool its internal temperature in order to allow more melatonin to be released in order for you to feel that tiredness onset so you can fall asleep and also stay asleep. And another thing that I was looking into recently, and about sleep and magnesium kind of go hand in hand. A lot of people are just like, oh, if I supplement with magnesium, it's going to help me fall asleep. But really, it more so has to do with muscle tension because magnesium also helps our muscles relax. So if we're taking in magnesium and we're training hard, then our muscles may get more of what it needs to relax. So that way it doesn't produce that excessive heat. And then we can cool our body temperature in order to go to sleep. And then also while we're sleeping, our body isn't tensing up from maybe cramps or whatnot because we've got that relaxation from having adequate magnesium levels in our body. So that's a cool thing that I had looked into recently because I would associate magnesium with just like, oh, helping you fall asleep. But then once you think about the mechanism of magnesium on muscle contraction, and then you think about body heat and you think about actually sleeping soundly, it's like, oh, the muscles are relaxed and they stay more relaxed longer because I have adequate magnesium levels in my body to keep them where they need to be. All right. So that was just a cool thing. I thought it was like cool to mention that here too. Okay. So trouble falling asleep and staying asleep. Then the next thing is low energy or motivation to train. So low energy, obviously, if you're under recovered, then you're not giving your body doesn't have or is trying to utilize things that it doesn't have to utilize in order to manage those energy levels or keep your energy levels high because you're using all of your fuel, your resources in order to continuously train at this high level. You're not allowing your body to restore its energy or its fuel levels to a higher level or even just your baseline levels in order to keep your energy balanced. So you may feel lower energy overall on a consistent basis. The next thing is motivation to train. So when you don't have those stores again, you down regulate your body's ability to manage your emotions effectively. So your motivation drops. You don't have that push, that ability to push past that feeling because the fatigue is at a higher state. The next thing is slower progress despite consistent effort. So here it plays into what I said about the baseline level. Even though you're training consistently, you are training at an intense level to where there's no recovery happening. And you're just constantly lowering your baseline capabilities until you don't have that same capability that you did before. So now you're at a lower state of readiness compared to a higher state of readiness and improved performance. Or it's just taking longer because let's just say you push that adaptation out a lot further away because your body has to start to build back up and come back from that um, fatigue that you've accumulated over this extended period of training without any rest and recovery. The next thing is brain fog, irritability, or elevated stress. So brain fog, obviously, again, not being able to think clearly, your brain just doesn't have the nutrients that it needs in order to function at a high level because it's using up those fuel sources for recovery, adaptation from training. The next thing is irritability. Again, when we don't have the proper recovery, we reduce our brain's ability to regulate our emotions, basically. And then elevated stress. So Elevated stress levels, it comes with the territory. So if you're always in this chronically fatigued state, your stress in your body overall is going to be higher, because your body's trying to recover, and is in a breakdown state because of all the training that you've done before. All right. And then the next thing is elevated resting heart rate or decreased HRV. And both of those can actually go hand in hand. So elevated resting heart rate is a really key sign that you're not in a ready state to perform at your best level. At that day, your training zone, the fatigue to get to that level is going to be a lot higher that day because your resting heart rate is already elevated. So you'll have to adjust what zone you're in or what heart rate you're deciding to target for that day because your heart rate is already elevated. So let's just say I train a lot of fighters. So you're going into a sparring session or you're going into just some skill training that day, the same effort you would normally put in feels a lot more fatiguing than previous days because your heart rate is elevated now or at a higher baseline than it was before. So that just means you're going to feel more fatigued doing the activities that were easier for you before. So, yes, simply put, if your heart rate is already elevated, you're going to feel more fatigue doing the same activities because it's at a higher heart rate. Um, the next thing is decreased HRV. I don't want to get into this one because HRV can be a little bit more complex, but HRV just studies your nervous system's readiness to perform. And if it's low, typically a lower HRV is just a signal of under recovery and also regulations outside of that as well. So if it shoots up really high, that can be another sign of just like overcompensation for an illness or something that's coming on. So if you're out of your baseline and your HRV drops a lot and it stays consistently lower, then that's a sign of, under recovery there. All right, common causes. So one common cause is too much training or intensity without enough rest or variation. Again, typically it runs on a 48-hour day to adapt and up to a higher baseline of performance. The next common cause is too little sleep, both in hours and quality. So when you're sleeping, obviously that's when you produce growth hormone the highest, and that's when your body adapts and recovers and rebuilds both physically and mentally. So if you're not getting good amount of hours of sleep, and then also the quality of your sleep isn't high, then you're definitely not going to be as recovered as you would if you did have that in place. And of course, we'll talk about how to get more. The other thing is unmanaged stress from work, relationships, or just psychological stress. So when you allow stress to run rampant in your life, and let's just say you're going into training with that high amount of stress, you're just reducing your overall capacity to perform at a high level there. Also, your cortisol levels are going to stay chronically elevated. It's one thing to have like highly elevated stress levels or cortisol levels, um, for a certain period of time or acutely from an exercise or a workout. But it's another thing for that to chronically stay there because then you're not actually rebuilding and building your body back up, both physically and also mentally there. Okay. So you have to manage those things. Then lack of low intensity movement, no active recovery, walking or mobility. So when we move, we recover because we're allowing blood flow to be more cons- we're allowing we're allowing that blood flow in our body to move more efficiently and at a higher rate. Whenever we're not moving as much, that blood flow to those areas that need to be built back up and just nutrients that gets delivered to all the areas in our body slows down. So just think of it as if you're not moving, that process is slowed down. So the delivery, I can't even speak right now. So the delivery, the delivery isn't as efficient as it would be if you actively moved. So you want to make sure you are actively moving on off days, or even if you're taking some time away from training, that you're still actively moving, and that's even a small walk can help. All right. So that was pillar number one. And pillar number one, obviously, was pretty extensive. But just understanding pillar number one, we're just building awareness around like what are the signs, first and foremost, what are some of those common causes. And then sometimes we can just look at that and be like, oh, duh, like I'm training really hard Then also, yeah, no, I do feel a little bit more irritable, and I do have soreness that hasn't gone away, or stiffness that hasn't gone away for a while. But that leads us into pillar number 2, restoration habits. So you're establishing systems to support recovery. So the goal here is to build daily and weekly habits that help the body and mind reset. So once awareness is in place, the next step is to actively create space for recovery. This isn't about doing less, it's about restoring balance between training stress and recovery capacity. So the few pillars here. So the first one is sleep optimization, okay? So you want to aim for 7 to 9 hours of sleep, of quality sleep per night. So I know we always hear the term about like getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep and how that's important, but it is important, and that's generally what the hour range falls on for most adults. Okay, and again, like we said, the importance of that is how your body repairs when you're sleeping, both physically and mentally, and you can't get away from that if you're trying to train for performance and also longevity, then you can't skip out on this step. Okay. So, how do we do that first and foremost? It's keep a consistent schedule. So, bedtime at the same time every night, and you wake up at the same time every day. Our body works on a rhythm. If we don't honor that rhythm, we're not giving our bodies the opportunity to fall asleep and stay asleep and get that really good quality sleep that we would. Um, by staying on a good schedule for sleep. So we want to make sure that we're at least within a 30-minute time frame. So if it's some nights you are in bed by 11 and then other nights you're in bed by 11:15, or in bed by 10 and in bed by 10:15, some type of 30-minute window, keeping consistency with that. So that's going to help your train your body to start to release those chemicals in order to help you fall asleep easier, then also wake up easier, and your body to get into that rhythm. And it takes some time to get into that rhythm. So, when things that you can do to help support that rhythm is dimming the lights and limit screens about 60 minutes before bed. Preferably, it'd be maybe even. So, if we have a lot of bright lights going on in our house while we are trying to wind down for sleep, that's a contradiction to the body on what needs to be going on right now. So it also suppresses your melatonin release. Again, as we said before, that correlates with how quickly you're going to fall asleep, and then also how deep of sleep you're going to get as well. So just dimming the lights, dim the lights in the house. That can already have a huge effect. It definitely worked for me and some of the clients that I work with as far as dimming the lights at least 60 minutes before bed, preferably 2 hours before bed, before your actual bedtime. So the next thing is cool, quiet, dark room. So cool, huge importance here, because 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit is usually ideal. So some of you may be like, that is extremely cold, but you can still wrap up in your blanket. But that is going to allow your body to reduce its internal temperature, again, to allow melatonin to be released at a higher rate. So that way you can fall asleep easier and you can get deep sleep. So, again, if you're not sleeping in a cool environment, that's already making it more challenging for you to fall asleep and then also get good quality sleep. So, you want to make sure the environment is cool. You can slowly lower this over time. You don't have to go straight to 65 to 68 degrees. Let's just say if you keep it at 65 when you're sleep or 75 when you're sleeping, then maybe take it down 3 degrees for one night, and then take it down another 3 degrees until you get to that ideal temperature range there, and what's going to work for you. You want to adjust this over time and make it work for your ideal situation. Okay. And then also, going too cold can also have the opposite effect as well. Because if we're too cold, then our body starts to shiver, and then that's going to get us in our muscles active, and then that's going to wake us up out of our sleep, or just have us a little bit more alert, even if we are quote unquote still in sleep. The other thing is quiet. So earplugs, making sure that if you have a noisy environment when you do go to sleep, maybe you live by a highway or something like that, then you can use some earplugs that kind of help with that. You can also add in a white noise machine, or you can use your phone and turn on one of those YouTube videos that have like a 10-hour long noise machine playing, or white noise machine playing, and kind of put it. I use this strategy a couple times for myself. You'll put it towards maybe like 30 minutes towards the end of that video, and make sure autoplay isn't on towards the end of that video, and have that playing as you're going to sleep. So that way, by 30 minutes in, it's turned off. You should already be asleep. And then that helped you go to sleep. And then you also have the earplugs in. So, and if you have it playing throughout the night, it could be a fan, a ceiling fan. It can be like a little small room fan. It can be something that just has this constant noise output that distracts your senses, your hearing, from different things that may go bump in the night. Um, Also, pink noise has been studied as a way to like keep you in a good, solid, deep rested state. So if you want to experiment with that, that's another strategy that you can use there too. Dark. So blackout curtains. Heavily important to invest in these blackout curtains. And if you don't have them right now, a simple solution is to get a mask. Because again, like we said before, light tells your body that it's time to be alert, awake. So it reduces that melatonin release. And then it also stimulates your body's ability to be awake. And then that's elevating your cortisol levels, or at least keeping them at a certain level that you don't want them at, in order to promote restful sleep. Okay. So that's the thing for sleep optimization. So trying to get to that 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night, keeping a consistent schedule, dimming the lights at least 60 minutes before bed, and keeping a cool, quiet, dark room. The next thing is stress regulation. So again, if you have elevated cortisol levels, you're not allowing your body to actually adapt and recover and rebuild. So you're just in this constant breakdown state. And you're just reducing your one ability to perform when you are performing your workouts, and your ability to adapt from your workouts as well. So the thing that we want to do here is practice deep breathing. So these are just some techniques here: deep breathing or mindfulness, 5 to 10 minutes a day. One simple thing that I've utilized is breath work. So one thing that I'll do is a 4 second inhale, a 6 to 8 second exhale to activate that relaxation. And you want to inhale through the nose for 4 seconds, exhale out the mouth for 6 to 8 seconds. Exhaling out the mouth just stimulates your vagus nerve, and it allows your body to tap into that rest. It signals to your body that rest and digest type of mode that you want it to be in whenever you're not training, or whenever you're not in a situation where you need to be alert. So like if it's before bedtime, if it's before a meal, or even after a meal, you can use these strategies in order to down regulate your system and help you get into a recovery state instead of being in that elevated stressful state. The mindfulness piece, it can come in a multitude of ways. It can literally be reflecting on gratitude. It can be reflecting on good times. It can be writing down things that you're learning and things that you're excited about. Um, it can, you want it to be something that is fulfilling, something that resides with your purpose and your values, and something that gives you a sense of joy inside as well. Because again, if we reflect, if we're doing mindfulness, but our mindfulness goes into dark thoughts, then that's defeating the purpose. So the next thing is take short resets throughout the day. So brief walks, music, or quick reflection count. So brief walks, that's a good, it gets you away from, especially if you can get away from your phone. Maybe if you do decide to listen to music while you're on your walk, again, it's not music that's kind of heavy. If you train hard and you listen to hardcore music while you're training, that just gets you motivated, that's cool. But on your walk, to where you're trying to reduce your overall stress levels, not trying to be in an amped up state, you don't want to listen to that type of music. You want to listen to things that are going to calm you down if you decide to listen to music on your walks, or also things that kind of stimulate your mind in a way that has you in a more, joyful or gratitude state. So brief walks in nature is good if you have that ability to do that. And then also music, just music that kind of brings you back mentally to to a state or a time to where it's a feel good moment, so to speak. Or you can visualize those feel good moments as well, or the vision that you have when you hear this certain music, the certain music that you're listening to, is something one of peace and relaxation. And then again, quiet reflection. And like I said, with the reflection piece, if you're somebody who already struggles with just like reflecting and ruminating on like bad thoughts, maybe the reflection piece isn't something that you would want to try to practice to get out of stress. It would be maybe another tool like listening to music, calming music that brings you into a state of relaxation, or taking a brief walk, or doing something more active, because the way that your mind works, it's more tuned into negative thoughts. And I understand that because I really had struggled with that before too. So the next thing here on stress regulation is to limit caffeine after noon. So in simple, it's a half life. So 3 to 5 hours for your body to actually get rid of that caffeine out of your system. So that's half, getting rid of half of it out of your system. So basically, it can last up to 8 hours, 8 to maybe even 10 hours in your system. And it also depends on you and your tolerance. But if you need to be calmed down by the time you're ready for bed, and let's just say you go to bed at 10 o'clock, or you want to be in bed by 10 o'clock, and you decide to have something with caffeine in it at 5 o'clock. So half of it's out of your system by the time you're ready to go to bed, but the other half is still there. So even though you may be able to fall asleep, you may not get as good quality sleep as you would have if you didn't have that caffeine that late in the day. So that's one simple adjustment that you can make there. All right. So now going into the next category is active recovery. So move daily. So walking, mobility, or light cardio to improve blood flow and joint health. So when we actually move our joints, we're actually lubricating those joints as well and getting it nourished, because the joint only has that joint capsule inside of there. It only has that in order to improve that joint's health. So when we don't move, we reduce the fluidity of those particular fluids inside of that joint capsule. So when we do that, then that's when we start to get those creaky joints, those joints that feel a little bit painful and stiff when we move. So movement is medicine, as we always say, but movement allows that fluid to stay fluid, and it also nourishes the joint as well. Again, the only nourishment we have for that is that particular movement. So we want to make sure we are moving those joints. You don't move, or use it or lose it, as they would say. Okay. So walking, mobility work, light cardio all helps with this. Okay. Light cardio, biking, walking on a treadmill, walking on the incline treadmill, maybe the elliptical, any type of light cardio is key here for active recovery. On rest days, 20 to 40 minutes of easy movement promotes nutrient circulation and recovery, as I said before. So on rest days, 20 to 40 minutes, that's kind of like a time frame that you can keep in mind, to not overdo it and to still get a good benefit by like having it above that 20-minute threshold there. Post training, include mobility or soft tissue work to maintain movement quality. So I kind of fall into the camp of, if your workouts are tailored towards you and you do have kind of movement restrictions that you have implemented as far as the prehab work for that, implemented in your workouts, you don't need as much of this. But if you're a competitive athlete, and or you do a lot of physical activity, or your job is very physically demanding and you're doing training on top of that, then this may help you keep your tissues and your joints healthy, because you're doing more than what your body may be capable of. So you have to do a little bit more on the recovery standpoint. So post training, maybe you do have to add in a little bit more mobility work there to hit some spots that you may have missed in your training. Okay. But good training typically includes mobility and soft tissue work. Just understand that. All right. So now we're moving on to pillar 3. Refinement, and I'll try and keep this as brief because it will be pretty brief because all it is just refining those things that we've established in the first two pillars. Okay, so now you're individualizing and automating recovery. So the goal here is to refine recovery strategies to your personal rhythms, stress levels, and training phases until they become automatic. So once foundational habits are consistent, recovery becomes a rhythm. It adapts to your life, not the other way around. Refinement means learning how to read your own recovery signals and making adjustments before issues arise. So, here are some refinement strategies. Track recovery metrics like sleep quality, mood, energy, and resting heart rate. So, how well are we sleeping, on a daily basis? This is what I said about earlier about the quick start guide. You track for 3 days. So, maybe just the week you're tracking your sleep quality and then you're seeing how that affects your training. You're tracking your mood. Are you more irrational than you are on, other days? That may be a sign of under recovery. Do you have way less energy on some days than others? That can be a sign of, okay, on this day, this is your hardest training day. So the next day following that, you usually have very, very low energy levels. So that day needs to be an active recovery day because you're not going to get the best out of your training, active recovery or a skill day, whatever you want to do, because you're not going to get the best out of your training. And then resting heart rate. If you see, again, after that heavy training day, the next day your resting heart rate is elevated. That is another sign that that is your heaviest or most fatiguing training day, potentially. Okay, so we want to track recovery metrics. Adjust training load seasonally. So you want to emphasize recovery during busy life phases or intense training blocks. So I always say this to my athletes. It's just like when life is crazy and busy and you have a lot going on there, you do have to adjust your training. I understand you have a goal that you're trying to aim for, but understand this as well. If you're trying to push through that heavy life stress that you have going on, and you're also doing crazy amounts of intense training, you're just asking for an injury. And this is not fear mongering whatsoever because I've seen it happen time and time and time again. When you don't adapt your training to crazy life stress that you have going on, it could be a loss in the family, it can be a sickness or an illness in the family that just came up unexpectedly, it can be having a newborn, it can be your kid may just be starting school or something like that, or maybe they just don't sleep that night, right? One of my clients, she had told me, hey, my week has been stressful. I kind of, didn't push training as hard this week because my daughter, she just did not want to sleep throughout the weekend. It kept me up. And that's fine. I was proud of her because she adjusted her training based off of what was going on in her life. Because you don't want to get a setback, not only in you have stress in life, now you go into training and still try and push, and then you get an injury. And then that's going to set you back even more, not only with your training, but mentally, it's going to set you back. And we all know like how bad injuries like play on our mental. Um, and just our motivation in general for whatever goal we may have. So yeah, like make sure you're making those adjustments whenever life is crazy. Okay. And also intense training blocks. So if you're going through an intense phase, I kind of use a example with fighters. Like if you're going into fight camp, you need to make sure lifestyle outside of the gym is dialed in. You're sleeping enough. You're telling your loved ones like, hey, I'm going into training camp. Please try to limit the amount of stressful things that you put on my plate. If you have the ability to do that, um, you need to make sure you're eating enough in the quality of your food. But the one key thing here is that you don't wait until fight camp to start to dial those things in. Why? Because now it's going to be even more mentally taxing to dial those things in because you're trying to establish new habits that you already don't automatically do. So you want to do those things way before you even get into a fight camp, or if you're a recreational runner, way before you even go into your run, or peaking for a competition. You want to have those things dialed in beforehand, so you don't test it out whenever you're getting ready for your first competition or your competition. You test these things out during training. You adjust these habits before you get to that point. Okay. So don't be that person to make that mistake of, trying to get everything fixed and dialed in during that phase. Start to establish the habits that's going to support that. By the time you get to that competition phase and you're trying to peak for competition, you're already prepared and you're already ready to really fine tune and dial it in. And I promise you, your performance is going to be 10 times better in your fight camp. Then also, you're going to reduce the chances of you accumulating an injury during your camp or pre-competition phase, because you're inducing a ton of stress on your body that it wasn't prepared for in the first place. Trying to get ready and already being ready. We already know it. What's the saying? What is the saying? Be ready and you don't have to get ready. All right. So be ready and you don't have to get ready. You're just fine tuning at this point. All right. I'll stop. I'll get off my soapbox here. So the next thing is personalized stress management. So if you like to write out things, journal. If you're okay with breath work and you don't have any type of health issues that would prevent you from doing breath work safely, do breath work. If time in nature, if you enjoy being outside, if you have the ability to be outside in nature, get out in nature. If you're creative and creative outlets put you in a peaceful and joyful state, do that. If being around loved ones, social connection is something that you thrive on, do that more often. Personalize your stress management to you. Don't just listen to even me saying, do this, do that. I'm giving you different tools to utilize to help out, and you choose which one works for you and helps you out, helps you lower your overall stress together. So that way, it's not, okay, this strategy is no longer working for me. It's like, or dang, I tried this one strategy that I was told to do and it didn't work. So I guess I'm just going to have to deal with my stress. No, there's a multitude of different ways in order to lower your overall stress and manage your stress levels. Okay. The next thing is recognize recovery thresholds. So, key thing here is just to know when to push and know when to pull back. It literally goes hand in hand with what I said. When life is crazy and life is busy, pull back inside of the gym, inside of your training. Still figure out which day you can push. And if every other day you have to slow down, you do that. For that time being, understand it's a season. It is a season in life that is going on right now. And we cannot control all of these things, but we can control the way that we approach it and our mindset towards it. Okay. So do not be discouraged when life throws a freaking curveball in your way. Life will do that. A curveball will happen every now and again. And sometimes we get lucky and we could go through maybe a whole entire year without a curveball. But usually within that year, there's going to be some curveballs there. And we have to respond appropriately and make the right adjustments. Okay. So all I'm telling you is just to make smart adjustments to the training that you're doing, and then also the approaches that you're doing to these things whenever life kind of gets in the way. And we're talking about recovery here, but I'm also talking in just like in general. All right. So when to push as well. Okay. So we're not just talking about like, okay, we just need to be really, really cautious about how much we're doing. No, like when your sleep is on point, when you're eating enough, when you feel energized, push, train hard, push your body to adapt and recover, because that's the prime time to do it. Because let's just say this, you have a season, maybe 3 months of maybe life stress is really low. There's no extra things that's happening outside of that. You feel really good in your body. That's the time to where you can push and really gain some improvements in a lot of areas, right? And then let's just say that next season, things start to get crazy and you have to pull back a little bit. You can maintain that high level of performance that you established during that early season. So this is the point here. It's not about always pushing, pushing, pushing and being at a high performance level. It's about working with the ebb and flows that happens in everyone's life. Okay. So just remember that it comes in seasons, life happens in seasons, and take advantage and push in the seasons that you can push, but also make a smart adjustments and pull back on the seasons to where you need to pull back. All right. The next thing is to integrate recovery into your identity. So treat it like training, scheduled, purposeful, and consistent. So schedule your recovery. Again, if you're just training by the seat of your pants, or I don't even know if I'm saying that quote right, but if you're flying by the seat of your pants or whatever it may be, but if you're just randomly choosing when you're going to work out, randomly choosing when you're going to do a recovery session, you're not going to get your body in any type of rhythm. You're just being sporadic and your body can't adapt appropriately to that type of stimulus. Some of you may say who are athletes and you train, or you're a coach who trains athletes and you're being like, yeah, whatever, like that's not how athletics work, is unpredictable. Yes, on the inside of competition, it's unpredictable. But guess what you do? You train for the unpredictable, right? You look at your opponent and you see what they might throw at you and you train for that. You look at what may happen on the field and then you train for that. The same thing goes for life. If you want to have consistent, you look at, okay, how much time do I have in my schedule to work out? How much time do I have in my schedule to establish a nighttime routine? Or when should I go to bed based on my work schedule, based on my training schedule, based on my family schedule? All of these things, you look at your overall life picture and you see where you can make these adjustments to integrate these recovery habits into your life now and get your body in a rhythm, so that way you're not pretty much trying to throw things at the wall and see if it sticks, or you get really good results from one recovery strategy at a point in time but then it doesn't work in another point in time because everything again in your schedule is sporadic. I think one of the key things for me in my life has been I started using Google Calendar. I remember I had just saw, I think it was one of my mentors saying like, if you can't control your schedule, then your life is always going to be kind of chaotic. So it's not really about controlling your schedule, but being realistic with what your schedule is. And I guess it would also be saying no to the things that don't support your goals and aspirations, and also that aligns with your values and who you are as a person. So, controlling your schedule as much as you possibly can, and this isn't being, um, let's just say, over compulsive in trying to be perfect with your schedule, but it is making room for the things that are important for you to get done in your schedule. And if recovery is one of those things, it's literally scheduling in your wind down time for sleep. That's what I do. I'll have an alert on my phone. 10 o'clock, wind down. So I'm in bed by 11. So wind down. Now I'm dimming the lights and now I'm reducing my screen time. Maybe I'm reading now. Maybe I'm just listening to some relaxing music. Whatever it may be for me to wind down, I have it implemented in my schedule. So at least it's a reminder. Doesn't have to be perfect every single night. I don't have to, like, it may go on my phone at 10 o'clock, wind down, and then I may actually start to do it at 10:30. But at least I've already established some type of habit with that. Okay. So it's just scheduling in these things in your schedule and making it purposeful for you, right? Is what you're trying to work on. So if sleep isn't the issue and it's more so managing your stress, put an alarm on your phone for your breath work or your walk or whatnot. And if it's not every day, what days do you have to do that? It doesn't have to be every day. It can be the days you have more time in your schedule to do those things. It's flexibility. And the thing that gets me is we can put so much pressure on ourselves to really try and do it every single day. But again, like we talk about, there's ebb and flows in life, and we have to make those adjustments, right? We have to make those adjustments based on the ebb and flows in life and flow with it and not try and resist what's going on. So if we can allow ourselves to, you know, be free in the sense of, hey, okay, I don't have every single day that I can wind down at that same time, but I can start to establish some of those other things in my schedule. So my walks or my mobility stuff, and start to improve in those areas in this season. Then maybe next season, I'm trying to do something different. Okay. And the consistency piece. Again, if you're consistent with one small habit, again, it's just setting a wind down routine, or if it's doing 10 minutes of a walk or 5 minutes to do journaling or something like that on a consistent basis, and then you just stack those habits over time, you'll come to realize that, it was hard because I tried to do everything at once. And it's easier because I've allowed myself to make adjustments and establish this habit consistently, and I don't even have to think about it. All right. So, closing. Most people train and fuel, but forget the third part, which is the recovery. And that's where true progress happens. So, recovery isn't the absence of activity, it's the presence of balance. So, again, as established, balance isn't about you having everything at the same level. Balance is about, in this season, what's the priority for me? By learning to recognize the signs and establish restorative habits and refine your rhythm, you'll build a foundation for performance that lasts. Okay. So even though we think about performance sometimes as like, okay, it's this thing that I'm gonna bang up my body and beat it up, and then that's gonna allow me to perform at my highest level. If we don't have a base foundation of good health, then we can't stack good, high quality performance on top of that. Or if we do, the house will come falling down by just one simple thing that exposes our chink in our foundation. Okay. Or they say chink in the armor, but I call it, let's say, a crack in our foundation, right? So we need to make sure our foundation of health is there. And of course, this goes without saying with the longevity piece. If we're not consistently allowing ourselves to build back up and recover and be mentally alert, be physically capable, then it's going to be hard for us to thrive in our life and have that longevity that we want. Okay. So if you have any questions about anything that I covered here, if there are things that I missed, feel free to put them down in the comment section on the YouTube video. If you're listening to this on the podcast, then go over to the YouTube video, put something down in the comment section below that you may have wanted me to pretty much expound on a little bit more or go into more detail on. And I promise you, I'll get back to you on that specific thing. And don't forget to download the guide here. And as always, I appreciate you listening, and I will see you in the next.